All right. Let's see. We have a few people in here. I don't know if anyone has any other questions or fun things they want to ask Jonathan.
Okay. All right. Okay. Cool. What would you say for having both tailwind and chakra in one project? In my honest opinion, that would bring confusion and overhead. Mixing class names and props to apply CSS rules wouldn't look great. Yeah. I can understand that. I haven't done it before. Would there be a need to do that? Maybe. I hardly think so. But it's possible. It's possible. I'm honestly not sure what to think. What would you say for having both tailwind and chakra in one project? I think you probably most likely need one. If you don't need like a component library, then I think tailwind would be the tool to go for. But if you want to have like components out of the box, then with a styling API, then I think Chakra UI would be the better alternative. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah, interesting question, Stephen. I'd never considered something like this. But I do realize that you might actually have, you can still tree shake your CSS. It's possible. So you probably get very little, like, it wouldn't cost you too much if you're already using Chakra to add Tailwind CSS and you have the post CSS plugin. But I still don't think it would be a very good idea. Depends. You need to have a convincing reason.
All right.
Okay, so which form components support validation? Which validator would you suggest? Vvalidate or viewvalidate? I've used viewvalidate most of the time. Chakra UI components all support the form components. We have a form control component that I think would work well with any form library, whether vvalidate with the scoped slots and also viewvalidate, where you can pass your the validator functions into the component instance. So I think they would both be able to work. It also actually Chakra UI also has a few form helper message components, as well as form error message components. So if you have errors, you no longer have to like manually write your own error like elements and style them. So Chakra UI has them as well. So you can import them and use them as well. Yes, Cybern, you are correct. Actually, all Chakra UI components are strictly follow the WAI ARIA standard for authored components. We spend a lot of time studying them and making sure each form is compliant. In fact, if you go to our GitHub repo and open up some of the component directories, you'll see that there is an accessibility report. So we try to show you how this component is accessible. And at the beginning, I think I didn't know if it would be of any value to most people, but I recently was contacted by someone, and he said that when he read the reports, he felt like this was the library he needed. So I hope more libraries use this, do this kind of thing as well. Cybern says that's awesome. Since I do struggle with implementing that most of the time. Yeah, it's actually it's kind of sad that in 2020, different browsers have different levels of support for, especially keyboard accessibility, which I feel many teams have to like re-implement this all the time because they're building a new library or they're building a new product. So I think. I think like, Chakra UI is, I think, a step in that direction. It's a library that doesn't lock you in because you don't want to change your styles. You want to have different styles, but it also gives you accessibility out of the box. So you can expect that it will always work in any browser. yeah, so one of the things we are trying to do internally for the next version of Vue 3 is to expose the accessibility JavaScript that we're using in the library. So if you don't need to use the components, you could import, say, a chakra UI view / use accordion accessibility, and that will give you all the JavaScript that you need for, say, the accordion if you want to build your own accordion library. So we're working on better modularity and better like tree shaking as well, and also we could expose some of these things to the user.
Nice.
That syntax looks confusing. One would not be able to tell that it's related to breakpoints. Yeah, so the I do understand, like, because it is new. This is not like very common, for example, especially in the Vue ecosystem. So chakra UI is actually a CSS in JS library. So there aren't very many. I don't know another CSS in JS library in Vue. So when we use styles, we're using style system under the hood because it's both concise, and we've also tried to document it as much as possible on the responsive styles page on the chakra UI docs, to explain that the least or the lowest index always represents the least breakpoint. So I do understand there's a bit of a learning curve, but I think it's worth learning. I think it can be adopted. If you think there's a better way that can be done, I'm always open to feedback. Oh yeah, we also do support object syntax. The array syntax is just shorter. There is an object syntax. So if you pass in an object and you say base is the lowest breakpoint, and then after that you have SM, MD, and large, and you can also define your own breakpoint in the theme. So you could say, you could create your own breakpoint and call it XXL and give it a value, the number of min width pixels, and then you could use it also in your template. So yeah, I forgot to mention that, but you can use the box object. I don't know if it's noted before, but when using the Nuxt Create App CLI and selecting Chakra UI, there's no option to pick the auto import of components. Is this something easy to add afterwards in the project? I'm going to look in the docs right now. Oh, actually, yeah, there is a. I recently tweeted out something to add it as a default out of the box for auto importing, because I realized I'm using it for all the projects I'm working on because it's just so good. So we have an open issue right now discussing the implementation. So the next version of the Chakra UI Nuxt module will auto import components for you, and you can also opt out if you want to explicitly import them. And it'll also be the same for Vue CLI. So when you create a Vue CLI project, we'll prompt you to see if do you want to auto import components. If you select yes, then it will install the Webpack plugin for you. So yeah, right. You won't find anything in the docs if you go Cybrin right now because it's not yet there. But we have an open issue and it will be documented right after. That was a good question. Yeah, it feels good, isn't it? It really I enjoy it. It's probably one of my favorite things as well. Ah, interesting. So I didn't know you could see the source code in Storybook. That's interesting. It's something worth looking into. If you could see the source code for the Storybook, I think that would be good. Yeah, that's something I'm gonna consider now that you mention it, Stephen. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Then yeah, props documented. Yeah, we also haven't documented the props. I'm not sure if we can do that in Vue, but if there is, I'd be happy to learn how that can be done. Yeah, I learned something as well today. Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you, Cybrin. I'm also excited for Sebastian's talk. If there aren't any more questions, is it okay if we end the talk, or if there is I'll answer them before I go. All right, cool. All right, have a great rest of your conference. Cheers.